Picture this. It's 2004, and the Philippine Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, is about to launch a revolutionary, high-tech, unofficial quick count to bring transparency to the national election. But then, just days before anyone casts a vote, the Supreme Court steps in and shuts the whole thing down. So what happened? Why was a plan for a faster, more open count stopped dead in its tracks? Well, let's dive into this incredible case. So this all boils down to one huge question that landed right in the lap of the Supreme Court. On the surface, you'd think, yeah, of course. I mean, who wouldn't want a fast, unofficial count straight from the source for the sake of transparency? But as we're about to find out, the answer was anything but simple. It really got to the heart of a much bigger issue. Who actually has the power to count the most important votes in the country? All right, to really get a grip on why this blew up into such a massive legal battle, we've got to rewind the clock a bit to the early 2000s. You see, COMELEC had this big, ambitious dream to modernize the country's elections. But, well, that dream was already hitting some serious roadblocks. And man, this timeline really tells the story of just how bumpy that road to automation was. For years, the big goal was a fully automated election system. But right away, phase one, just validating voters, ran into problems. And then, bam, the real knockout blow. The Supreme Court completely scrapped the contract for phase two, the actual automated counting machines, right before the 2004 election. That left COMELEC scrambling, with only one piece of its grand vision left on the table, phase three.
So, with their main automation plan in total ruins, COMELEC basically looked at what was left in the toolbox and decided to throw a Hail Mary. They decided to push ahead with phase three all by itself. The concept seemed straightforward enough. Grab a specific copy of the paper election results, have people type them into computers at local centers, zap those results to Manila, and then, voila, publish unofficial results almost instantly. It was their last-ditch effort to bring some kind of modern speed to the election. But, this last-minute pivot, it didn't sit well with everyone. In fact, it set off some major alarm bells in some very high places. Some of the country's most powerful people and groups looked at this plan and saw a huge, fundamental problem with it. And they took that problem straight to the top.
And just look at who was challenging this. This wasn't just some fringe group or a single disgruntled politician. We're talking about the heavy hitters, the heads of both the Senate and the House of Representatives, all the major political parties, and even NAMFREL, the official citizen watchdog for elections. When you see a coalition that broad, you know the concerns are serious.
And this quote right here from the Senate president himself, it just cuts right to the heart of their argument. He's saying, hey, wait a minute, this isn't just a simple quick count. This is basically a canvas for the president and vice president. And that was the problem, because the Constitution gives that power, and that power alone, to Congress. They saw this as COMELEC jumping the gun, and the stage was set for a massive constitutional showdown.
Okay, so the stage is set, the case has landed in the Supreme Court. So how did the battle lines get drawn? Let's break down the core arguments from both sides. On one side, you had the petitioners. They were hitting hard on four key points. First, that COMELEC was stealing a power that belonged to Congress. Second, there was no money legally approved for this. Third, they were using official documents for something they weren't intended for. And fourth, they broke the rule about giving everyone enough notice for new tech. And COMELEC's defense? It was pretty simple. They just said, hey, relax, it's unofficial, not a real canvas. And besides, this is all just part of our job to make sure elections are credible. So, you've got the arguments on the table. The election is literally just days away. The entire country is holding its breath, waiting to see if this huge last-minute project is a go. And then, the Supreme Court came out with its decision. And it was fast, and it was decisive. Boom. The court brought the hammer down. The whole plan was toast. Dead in the water. That COMELEC resolution that started this whole thing, it was declared null and void. So the big question is, why? I mean, this whole thing was supposed to be about transparency, speed, all good things, right? So why did the court stop it? Well, they didn't just say no and walk away. They laid out 6 very specific, very powerful reasons for their decision. First off, the court basically said the Senate president was right. This plan stepped on Congress's toes. The Constitution is crystal clear. Only Congress gets to officially count the votes for president and vice president. The court's logic was pretty straightforward. If you can't do the official count, what makes you think you can run an unofficial one that basically front-runs the whole constitutional process? Reason number 2, follow the money. Or in this case, the lack of it.
There's a fundamental rule in government. You can't spend public money unless Congress passes a law specifically saying you can, for that specific purpose. And this whole quick count project, it had no budget. Zero. Zilch.
And we're not talking about pocket change here. COMELEC's own estimate was a whopping 55 million pesos just to get the data entry part up and running. That's a huge chunk of money that had no legal approval whatsoever. And if you think that's wild, get this. During the actual court hearing, a COMELEC commissioner admitted under oath, quote, "We are trying to determine where we can secure the money." I mean, can you imagine? They had already approved the multi-million peso project, but were still trying to figure out where the money would come from? It was an absolutely jaw-dropping admission.
Reason number 3 was all about staying in your lane. The law is really specific about who's supposed to do an unofficial count. For decades, that job has been given to a single accredited citizens group. In this case, NAMFREL. The law literally gives them a special copy of the results just for this purpose. So the court said, sorry, COMELEC, this isn't your job to do.
Okay, reason number 4 is a big one, a real technical knockout. There's a rule in the election code that's crystal clear. If you're going to use any new election technology, you have to give all the candidates and all the political parties at least 30 days notice. It's so everyone has a fair shot to check it out. And just look at the calendar. The resolution gets approved on April 28th. The election is on May 10th. You don't need to be a math genius to see that's only 12 days. It was literally mathematically impossible for them to follow the law. It was an open and shut violation. Reason number 5 is kind of like pulling a crucial block out of a Jenga tower. Remember, the whole modernization plan was designed in interconnected phases. Phase 3, this electronic quick count, was supposed to get its data from Phase 2, the automated counting machines. But the court had already scrapped Phase 2, so Phase 3 was left as a project with no foundation. The whole legal basis for it just collapsed. And finally, reason number 6 was just plain common sense. The court looked at the situation and said, wait a minute, you're telling us the official election body is going to run 2 different vote counts at the same time? Can you imagine the chaos? You'd have a fast, unofficial result and a slow, official one, and they would almost certainly be different at any given moment. That's not transparency. That's a recipe for confusion and distrust. So when you strip away all the legal jargon, what's this whole thing really about? It comes down to this one big fundamental idea, the rule of law. Sure, COMELEC had good intentions. They wanted speed, transparency, credibility, but good intentions have to play by the rules. And you know what? The Supreme Court said it best in their final decision. They basically said, look, we get what you were trying to do, and those are great goals, but even the best ideas have to be carried out within the lines drawn by the Constitution and the law. You just can't cut corners, no matter how good your reason seems. And that's really the big takeaway from this whole affair. It's a powerful story that leaves us with a really important question to think about, not just for elections, but for any part of government. We know that good intentions have to be carried out the right way. So what happens when they're not? What's the real cost to our trust in the system when the rules get bent, even for a supposedly good reason?